about perversity. And I'm pretty much talking about this topic with its original meaning, dated back to when it was introduced in Old French, which basically means to turn away. I think it was initially pronounced pervertir. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Where per was to turn and vertir was like away from something. Or it might be switched to opposites, but you can look it up for yourself. But initially its old meaning was to turn away. And then eventually it was like turn away from what's deemed as normal or was deemed to be expected. And this initially came to me based off of wanting to look up about what the original meaning behind the word pervert originally had. I know in society we kind of use it in a way in which it is mainly tied to having abnormal sexual desires, and mainly we use it in reference to adults' attraction to children, or even who do such in a way. And this is where I say a part of my interest. I love things that are taboo and kind of applying things in such a taboo way because of exactly how I'm using in this video, or will be using and playing on the word perversity. Once I found out its original meaning or its initial meaning before it's obviously was changed as time changed, things change. It probably is an anthropological lens to look at that, because I was studying in my last course about cultural relativism, and it has as many different lenses that you can look through certain topics such as like gender and sex and family, through like a moral lens, through moral relativism, through cultural relativism, through language relativism, through epistemology relativism. So I guess I'm playing on the word perversity in reference to relativism and through the lens of language, and obviously going back in time. I think it's historical relativism, yes, historical relativism, which is the relationship to time and how, things change over the course of time. I think I'm hitting that on the nail right. Anywho, I'm obviously going back in time and playing with the original meaning of the word perversity, and this initially was tying me into this bigger calling I feel, and it's like I yearn for deviation. Another way, a truer way. Okay, I'm back. But initially, how I yearn for deviation, another way, a truer way, that's a part of a writing that I did do on this topic, on this word, on this feeling. Essentially, it was a feeling. Yearning for another way, a more true way, a more connected way after feeling disconnected from my body, and coming to find out that the way that I yearn for, or the calling that I keep getting, that I've ignored time and time and time again. And each time I ignore it, it gets worse. I'm furthering the disconnect between like my body and spirit, myself. And I don't think I'll read y'all the full piece, but I might. And if so, I'll include it right now with a central video. But initially, the main topic I wanted to cover, basically what I wanted to talk about covering this piece that I written on is how if you truly want to tap into your authenticity, it looks like deviation to those closest to you, for some, to society, because it is like everyone telling you who you are and what you should do and who you must be. And then you look in the mirror, or you have that big realization, or you take that trip, or you have some sort of life-changing event that occurs that then acts as a transformation. And it's up to you to alchemize that transformation or not, to transmute whatever you're initially feeling to get to that goal, whatever that goal is. But it's like hearing that your whole life. And that's essentially my upbringing. You should do this, or you're really good at this, or you should do X, Y, and Z, and this is the right way to be, and this is the right way to act, and this is the right way to behave. And you have a realization that you're living a life tied to a script that you didn't write, that doesn't belong to you. And that's a big one right there, that emotional transformative process of realizing that a script, a baggage, a bag, a certain level of weight that you've been carrying for so long does not belong to you, and it never did, because you go through this sense of shame. Why did I put myself through this for so long? And then you realize what you need to leave behind, and that plays with nostalgia, and that plays on the chords of our emotional capacity to leave things and people where we may have found them, just to connect more and deeper and in a more authentic way with ourselves. And that's the cost of authenticity. Authenticity acts as you. What are you willing to do to be all of you? What are you willing to lose to be all of you? Without focusing on the gain, what are you willing to let go of? What are you willing to change? Who are you willing to be? And can you maneuver, transmute, alchemize that feeling of being cringe or being embarrassing, or looking like a beginner, looking like you know nothing, and then being comfortable with it all? Not only looking like, you don't care about those said feelings, but then how are you willing to be comfortable while you maneuver through that feeling? And that is a grueling process that plays on our emotional and mental capacity as we are expanding. And that's the cost. That's not the cost, but that's just the process of expanding. It's like Lucy the movie, where each level she's kind of like unlocking the potential of her brain, and then she reaches it, and then she reaches it, and she reaches it. But it comes with like a challenge. It comes with some form of change, and that can be a very painful process. Yeah. So essentially, my perversion is my calling to be all of me with no restrictions. That is the purpose. That is my purpose, to being all of me with no restriction or nothing tying me down. Not even myself, and not even an old version of myself regarding who I thought I was and what I thought I would be doing and who I thought I would be and who I thought would be along with me on the journey. Nothing tying down to me. No external factors and no internal factors getting in the way of me being myself completely. I think that is so attractive. And for a long time, I had this calling, and it rings, and it rings, and it vibrates beneath my skin, and I hear it in the corners of every room that I feel, that I move through. It's like each time I ignore it, the further I distract myself. I distracted myself with people. I distracted myself with hobbies. I distracted myself with things. I've distracted myself with just giving these thoughts, ideas, versions of myself that were created from the lens of other people reading and integrating scripts that were passed down generations. Those are the distractions. And it's not until I realize that doesn't resonate with me. The way that I was living and what I was doing and who I was around no longer resonates anymore. Then it becomes, how long do I keep making space for these things to exist without addressing certain things or without expressing certain parts of myself? I think that's the greatest sense, or I should say commitment to self-betrayal. Is creating space for things and versions of you and keeping people around and doing things, whether it's that job or going to school for some people that may resonate with. It may even be a business for some. You're only tied to it because of money and what that allows you to do. But it's that realization of, do I keep creating this space to keep doing these things, to keep being the type of person, to keep being around these types of people at the expense of myself? And that reflection in itself was like, wow, who am I living for? And what's the point of living if I'm not living for me? Not for mom and dad, not for brother or sister, not for friends, not for this. Who is truly benefiting from it all? And what's the point of doing this thing that we call life if it's not for me, if I'm not the center and I'm not allowing the universe, the world, to orbit that center? If I'm not in the center of it, if I'm not even considerate enough to keep me at the center, what's the point? What's the point of doing it? And I felt like, and I say this in the writing, a princess locked away in a castle, waiting for a prince, waiting for some sort of saving. And the realization is realizing that no one's coming, because no one has the key to the door but me, and that the key isn't outside of me, but it's in me, it's inside of me. And it's always been there, and it's been waiting for me to come to this part, come to this union, realization in my mind, so that I can save me. And I wouldn't even have it any other way. I wouldn't want anyone saving me. It was always supposed to be like this. And that unlocks a whole new journey. And this goes back to my last video of how we're in a rush to heal. When I talk about forgiveness, how we rush to forgive. We rush to forgive like we rush to heal. Like we rush to the good part of the movie and the good part of the book, and when everything is just so seamless. But the juice and the essence of life is all in that middle. It starts at that beginning. It doesn't end at that end, but it's really the juice of the fruit, the essence of life, what it's all about. It's all in the middle. It's all when it starts getting a bit uncomfortable, but you find comfort in that. It's all when you realize you know nothing, but you feel so secure in the fact that you know nothing. And once I got there, it was honoring that sense of play and curiosity of about like it just like, simply exploring. This is my life, and then I get to make it I get to make it all that I want it to be. This is my blank canvas. It's like, this is my world, the blank canvas. I'm the artist, and I get to make whatever it is. And there's no right or wrong way of doing it. There's no right or wrong decision. I even had this with I had a conversation with my best friend about this, but I believe that right and wrong is a human construct. It's a social construct, and I think that when you decide, and obviously there's limitations, but this is where we start talking about morals, which is subjective, but I don't believe that there's a right or wrong. I just believe that when you start doing something, start being someone, and you start feeling like it's wrong, it's when it's wrong. And when you feel like it's right, it's when it's right. And essentially, there's no right or wrong. So there's no right or wrong decision. There's no right or wrong way of being. And when you come into union and making peace with that, this is a playing field. It's like being back on the playground that we are all nostalgic about. And you're on the swings, and then you go to the slide, and maybe the monkey bars. Maybe you're doing cartwheels on the field. You know, maybe you're playing tag. And that also allows for you to look like a beginner again and again and again, to be able to pick up things and put them down and pick them up and put them down and pick them up and put them down until the right buttons go on. But no one wants to look like that, right? No one wants to look like they don't know what they're doing, or that they have their hands in too many pots, because that's embarrassing. And that, and even in itself, is a social contract. I actually think that when you start feeling like you're doing something embarrassing, it means that you're doing it all just right. I feel like that sense of embarrassment is a close connection to our inner child. And that's associated with that you're doing something you really find fun and enjoyable. But the way society has kind of programmed us to think and feel about what we think, or feel about what we feel, comes with these little limitations and restrictions that makes us feel cringe, and we feel embarrassed. But as y'all know, I'm a Pisces, I can get off track. And when you reel it back in, that it wasn't until I realized that the key was within me, and that I was going to do the saving, that I made peace that I wouldn't have it any other way, and that it was always going to be this way, no matter how hard or how badly I did want to feel saved or be saved, that I was going to do the saving. And that is when I picked up that call. And when I picked up that call, I heard, "Welcome home." And I see all of these versions of me, and I'm no longer shameful or guilty by them, but I make peace, and I nurture them, and I love them. The parts that I've known, the parts that I know, and the parts that I'm getting to know. And that has turned me into who I am today. And I think that is essentially how we all should be maneuvering through life, centering our perversions. It's our little nicks and knacks and our weird little hobbies or interests, to fall deeply in love with them again and again, to get lost into them, to enmesh our mind, body, and spirits with them. That is the purpose. So I make this video to encourage you to dive deeper in your perversion or perversions. Get lost, get enmeshed. You'll find the key to whatever it is that you're seeking for right now. And essentially diving deeply into your perversions, or even outside of your knicks-knacks and little hobbies or interests. And I'm mainly applying that to any of the knicks-knacks and interests that are outside of you, because essentially what I mean is you dive into your perversions, that you dive deeper into yourself. That can be scary, because you'll be going into rooms that you've never dared to open. And it's also that same feeling of the skeletons in the closet that you've never dared to look at, touch, that you sometimes can't even sit next to. And essentially, that's what it's all about. Is falling deeply into the parts of you that the world has shunned and told to put down, or told was too much and too sensitive, too ugly, embarrassing, maybe nasty. No, maybe not nasty, but I think you get exactly what I'm putting down if you've gotten to this point in the video. And I hope that when you have the courage, because essentially having the courage to dive into your perversion, authenticity, who you are in the dark and the light, because there's no difference. That's the yin and the yang. They both need each other. That once you dive deeper into that you just learn how to be there. Because essentially you'll be asked, do you have the courage to be seen? And not only do you have the courage to be seen, but do you have the courage to be seen? And essentially what that means is that you have the courage to be seen and not care about how you're perceived. Because it's only your perception of self that matters. And not only that your perception of self that matters, but that's also what's going to inform your reality, your experiences. It's going to influence every single part of that. So that's my perversions, or my perversion. Love you.